Hi, I'm Roger Jenkins and I have a story for you. And the story that I want to tell you now is a story that comes from Myanmar. And the reason that I want to tell you this story is because at this moment I am sat in my rather palatial suite. And who knows, it may well have been the suite that Noel Coward or Somerset Maugham stayed in when they also stayed here at the Strand. I have to say, the only reason that I am here is thanks very much to the Italian Embassy. They have brought myself and my two good friends, Marco Lulli from Rome and Sabrina Zuba, who is also Italian but lives in Singapore. And we are here, we're going to perform our version of Stories from the Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. But the story I want to tell you is a Burmese tale. And it's about the king. And the king was sat one late afternoon on the balcony outside the palace, looking out across the city towards the magnificent pagoda, the golden pagoda of the Shwedagon temple. And he was there with his royal advisor, and they were snacking on a Burmese delicacy, which is honey that's on puffed rice cakes. Now the king, more involved perhaps with his conversation than he might ought to have been, was not paying attention to the honey on his cake. And as she was talking, a drop of the honey fell off the rice cake and landed on the rail that ran around the balcony. The advisor, seeing what had happened, immediately stood up and said to the king, Your Majesty, shall I call one of the servants to wipe up that drop of honey? And the king looked at him and said, Oh, no. It's just a drop of honey. Don't worry about it. It's not our problem. And the advisor sat back down and they carried on discussing. But the advisor wasn't really paying attention to the king. He was watching that drop of honey, which began to dribble very slowly across the wooden banister and then whee, splat, fell down into the street below. And the advisor couldn't help but look down to see what had happened. No sooner had that honey splat landed on the road than a fly came and began to sample it. But barely had it begun than a gecko, a lizard on the wall, leapt off, landed beside it, and its long tongue snaked out and took the fly. But barely had it begun to munch its way through that tasty little fly than a cat that had been crouching nearby, meow, pounced and caught the lizard, which disappeared headfirst this time. But no sooner had the cat swallowed the lizard, before it had time to lick its lips, a dog, woof, came out from an alley and began to chase the cat. The advisor, who had been watching the whole thing, turned to the king and said, Your Majesty, there's a dog and a cat having a fight down in the street below. Perhaps I should get one of the servants to go and break them up. The king looked at the advisor and said, No. Said it's just a dog and a cat having a little argument. No. It's not our problem. Do have some more honey and rice cakes. Well, as the dog was chasing the cat's owner came out and began to chase the dog, trying to get it away from the cat, and began to hit it with a stick. The yelps from the dog attracted its owner, who was sat at a cafe across the other side of the road. He came up and he was not pleased at all, and he began to shake his finger and shout at the woman. And when she refused to stop hitting his dog, he began to start kicking out the cat. And pretty soon the two of them were not only raising their voices, but also raising their fists. Your Majesty, said the advisor, a man and a woman are now fighting over their cat and their dog. Perhaps I really ought to send someone down to break them up. And the king said, Oh, no. He said, It's not our job. No. Please. No. It's not our problem. Well, the woman was not happy, and her loud cries for help soon brought her friends. They were out having a good shopping session together. And barely had they arrived than the man, seeing the need for reinforcements, called his buddies, who came out from the cafe, probably from where they'd been watching the football, and soon the friends of the cat owner and the friends of the dog owner, they were shouting at one another. And soon somebody gave somebody a push, and somebody else then gave somebody a thump, and then a kick, and before you know it, there was a big melee, and the people were pushing and shoving and cursing and thumping and screaming and yabbering, and oh! The advisor turned to His Majesty and said, Your Majesty, now there's a large crowd of people and they're fighting. I really do think we should summon the police perhaps in order to break them up. And the king said, Oh, please, we've got far more serious problems than that to deal with. We do, said the advisor. Yes, said His Majesty. Oh, calling his servant, we're out of honey. Servant, please, bring us some more honey and a couple more rice cakes, if you don't mind. But sire, the people in the street, oh, please, said His Majesty, it's not our problem. Well, first it was the police, and then it was the soldiers, and they were all trying to sort out the problem and see who had started it. And when they heard the story from the cat owner, some of them sided with her, as she came from the north. But when they heard the story from the dog owner, well, some of the soldiers sided with him because he came from the south. And before long, it wasn't just the cat owner and her friends and the dog owner and his friends, but there were soldiers and police and soldiers and police, and there was a whole fight going on. It became a riot, and the riot got worse. It became a civil war. And there were people who were injured. There were fires that began, and not just in that street, but in fact, someone started a fire at the wall of the palace. And soon the palace itself was on fire. And the king and his advisor had to beat a hasty retreat out of the back of the palace. And as they made their way out from the palace, the king looked back and saw the flames rising higher and higher and higher. And he turned to the advisor and said, perhaps you were right. Perhaps that drop of honey was our problem, after all.